I never thought I'd sue an HOA, never thought anyone would try to charge me to drive on land my family's owned since 1987, but then an Orange County transplant did exactly that, and my peaceful retirement turned into the single best property fight I've ever had. I'm Dante Steele, 52, retired construction foreman, and the gravel road my dad and I built when I was 16 isn't just a path to the barn. It's 3 generations of sweat. My granddad taught me how the ground tells you where water runs, where frost heaves will show up, where a road will last or fail. He'd sit on the tailgate with a thermos and name every curve like it was kin. Those lessons live in the stones. Your access road creates safety concerns. Your access road creates safety concerns and diminishes community aesthetics, she read as if red was a kindness. You have 30 days to bring it into compliance. 30 days to asphalt a lane my family had hand-graded. I stared at that paper, tasted diesel and rain, and felt the ridiculousness of being billed for walking where my boots have always gone. It felt like someone walking into your kitchen and handing you a bill for the table. At first it was petty stuff, snide notes under the door, neighbors suddenly curious about the brand of my pickup, a contrived 47-page traffic impact study about a stretch of gravel that had seen tractors, pizza deliveries, quinceañeras, and Christmas dinners for decades. Then it escalated. Committee members began parking SUVs at the entrance to force delivery drivers to turn around. Someone scattered roofing nails across the drive at dawn, enough to shred a tire. A private investigator trailed me and photographed me buying lumber in a 6-pack like I was plotting a heist. Little by little, the unpleasant smell of small-town surveillance turned into something darker. Act 2 is when I stopped replaying the insult and started doing the work that actually matters. Decades in construction teach you to love paperwork because good paperwork beats loud mouths. I spent mornings in the county clerk's office digging through deeds and old surveys with penciled notes in the margins, the kind of records people forget about until they matter. That's where I found prescriptive easement rights. In plain language, if you've used access openly and continuously long enough, the county recognizes that use. My road predated their subdivision by decades. That paper was a map back to a fact Bethany couldn't conveniently redraw. To perform his job, my security cameras to perform his job. My security cameras caught someone cutting the hydraulic lines on our excavator at night, targeted sabotage by someone who understood machinery. Then an inspector called me and said quietly, "She tried to slip me $2,000. Bribery. Once someone moves into that territory, you're not in a neighbor disagreement anymore." I wasn't alone. The Hendersons' neighbors, for longer than any HOA charter, brought over a Polaroid of my father and grandfather beside the first pile of gravel and looked at me like family looks when someone else tries to steal a story. Diesel Rodriguez, who runs heavy equipment and speaks in machine metaphors, put his hand on the gate and said, "If you're going to fight, let's build something they can't spin into weakness." The county surveyor came out, and with that crooked grin surveyors get when they find a mistake, sent me a photo Bethany's own driveway cut 3 feet into my property. For months she'd scolded me while stepping daily onto the land she claimed to protect. Then the twist that made the whole thing a mess of small-town crime drama. Mrs. Henderson told me Bethany had quietly offered to waive HOA fees for anyone who'd testify my road was a danger. A Freedom of Information request turned up emails coordinating a campaign of complaints and crafted narratives about safety concerns. A forensic accountant traced HOA funds into suspicious no-bid contracts tied to Bethany's family. Suddenly, this wasn't about flowers and fences. It was about money, power, and a manufactured justification for both. I could have just filed suit and waited for the machine to grind, but I decided to build. Diesel and I drew plans that would make county engineers smile: engineered base, proper drainage compaction tests, signage, wildlife considerations, erosion, control the works. We pulled permits, hired a lawyer who enjoys a tidy binder, and documented everything. The strategy was practical and surgical: make the truth physical, durable, and endorsed by professionals, so the argument wouldn't be a matter of who yelled louder, but who actually complied with standards. The day the excavator first bit into my old lane, Bethany called 911, full-throated alarm, Unauthorized commercial construction deputies arrived. I handed them a stack of permits and stamped plans and watched one officer flip through them, then glance at the excavator and shrug. All the paperwork checks out, he said. My cameras set up as witnesses recorded board members sneaking onto my property to install spy cameras, neighbors taking notes like jurors, and one of the board members in the floodlight planting spikes across the driveway. Video with license plates and HOA jackets on display changes courtroom stories into legal ones. The private investigator who'd been photographing me for months did what I half hoped and half feared. He refused to plant evidence and called my lawyer to say he had been asked to do so. His testimony that Bethany solicited him to fabricate crimes shifted the case from a nasty neighbor feud to potential criminal conspiracy. Combine that with the inspector who refused the envelope of cash and the accountant's tracing of diverted HOA funds, and the county prosecutor suddenly had a file thick enough to put pressure on more than one front. Act 3 unfolded like a slow, satisfying demolition. At the HOA meeting where Bethany expected applause, county engineers testified that my road met or exceeded safety standards, while the subdivision's streets failed multiple inspections. The accountant laid out how HOA money had been funneled into unauthorized contracts. The PI recounted solicitations to commit felonies. Several board members resigned at the podium. The judge dismissed Bethany's emergency petition with a line I'll never forget: "You cannot enforce what you do not legally possess." He awarded legal fees and referred parts of the file for criminal investigation. None of that unmade the sleepless nights or the petty cruelty I'd been subjected to, but the practical outcomes were undeniable. During a bad spring storm, the county used my road for emergency detours because my drainage worked where their streets flooded. School buses rerouted easily. Neighbors who'd been quiet out of fear started showing up at meetings with questions and a backbone. We turned a bitter fight into infrastructure and education workshops on property rights public sessions with county inspectors explaining the boring but essential mechanics of permits and a model private road specification that other landowners could use. We tried to make the aftermath constructive. I helped set up a small scholarship in my grandfather's name for construction trades, paying for tools and a semester of tuition for 2 students each year, kids like Maria, who worked evenings to help her family, and Tommy, whose grandmother's garden had once been cited by the old HOA for being non-compliant. The ribbon cutting for the finished road had county commissioners' neighbor's diesel with grease on his hands and a photographer from the regional paper. Dave Peterson, the former board member who'd been caught planting spikes, did restitution working on the crew and learned to grade and compact, and more importantly, to respect honest work. The legal consequences were real restitution plans, probation for those who'd crossed the line, and a restructuring of the HOA under proper state oversight. The county adopted clearer standards for private road permitting. Other communities called me with similar stories. We started an annual Property Rights Day on the 4th of July, where county staff teach people how to read deeds, document harassment, and avoid legal traps. It became less about me and more about making sure the next family doesn't have to fight what I fought. So what's the moral authority in a fancy letterhead still carries weight, and unaccountable authority can be corrosive. But stubbornness without preparation is just noise. Competence, knowing your deeds, documenting everything, building things that last, is the quiet antidote. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be right. You have to be ready and willing to do the slow, steady work. Was I ruthless? Maybe a little. Was I right? Absolutely. The better victory wasn't watching one person fall. It was neighbors reclaiming dignity, kids biking along a road built to protect them, and 2 scholarships paying for tools and tuition because a petty fight met a patient, competent response. Your turn. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Drop it below. Tell me if you think I went too far, and if you know someone facing petty power, share this with them. Sometimes blue paper and a firm shovel are the best kind of justice.